A lot of government corruption in the news lately, which seems to be a unfortunately recurring experience. And we are joined by a great guest who is an expert on fighting government corruption. Robert Weissman is the president of Public Citizen, and he's actually author of the new book. Go ahead and put this up on the screen, The Corporate Sabotage of America's Future. And I like this part, what we can do about it. Robert, welcome. Great to have you.
Hey, it's great to be with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So what inspired you to write the book at this particular moment in time?
You know, one thing I think is coming out of the Trump period, we've been so focused necessarily on fighting Trump, defending democracy, and preventing fascism that we've turned away to some extent from the underlying factors in our society, the economy, and our politics that got us here in the first place. We've also lost sight and all the focus on polarization, relatedly, on all the things we agree on. So at the end of the day, I think we have a problem of too much corporate power in America. And if you look at the polls, people across the political spectrum agree with that on issue after issue after issue and want to do something about it.
Robert, you detail in the book, you got chapters industry by industry. Can you outline some of the most egregious industries and the way that they influence policy here in Washington through effectively legalized corruption?
Yeah, we look at big pharma, big tech, and big oil. If we start with big pharma, that's the industry with the most lobbyists in America, probably the most lobbyists in the world. They have more than 3 lobbyists for every member of Congress. And they do that because they're so dependent on government support. They're dependent on government support for research and development. They're dependent on taking at a discount or for free the fruits of that government research and development. They're dependent on the government to approve their products. They're dependent on the government to purchase their products. And they're dependent on the government to protect their monopolies and purchase their products at too high a price. So we've seen the results of that political influence in each of those areas I've just talked about, including notably and probably the most corrupt deal in modern American history, where we created a Medicare drug program to provide pharmaceutical coverage for seniors, but we prohibited the government from negotiating with the drug companies over that. That's costing us on the order of $500 billion over the next decade. We've saved about $100 billion of that from the provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act, but we got a long way to go.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about big oil, which is one of the other sectors that you really dig into here.
Well, big oil has perpetrated the greatest crime in the history of the world by denying the climate crisis for years and blocking action on it. We're living with that right now. Everybody's lived through disasters around the world this past year, and we're thinking about these things as out of the norm, but they're actually going to be not just normal, but weak versions of the kind of chaos that we're going to experience in the coming decades. And it's not that we didn't know about this problem. In fact, big oil knew about the prospect of climate change probably before anyone else, certainly dating back to their corporate boardrooms in the 1970s. And instead of saying, okay, we're going to share this information and help the world figure out a way out of this, they engaged in a concerted effort over decades to deny the science and block action. And we're still living with that right now in terms of their objection to moving forward to a clean energy future. And we're certainly living with the results of it every day.
You know, one thing I was wondering from your perspective is we've been talking a lot about Bob Menendez this week for obvious reasons. Stands accused of taking literal gold bars and having hundreds of thousands of dollars of cash stuffed in jackets with his own name on it from these Egyptian businessmen, effectively accused of selling out the country to the Egyptian government, exploiting his very powerful position as chair of the Foreign Relations Committee. It's very easy to look at those stories as one of personal failing, which certainly it is that. But do you see broader structural issues, or is this about the people that are involved here?
Well, I think the Menendez story is kind of a distinct one. If the allegations are true, I don't think that kind of corruption normally goes on in Washington, D.C. That's kind of like unsophisticated corruption. It's also not structural corruption. And the structural corruption is for sure far more powerful and consequential. It didn't start with the Citizens United decision in 2010, but it got way worse then. That was the decision, of course, from the Supreme Court that said companies could spend whatever they want to influence election outcomes. And we've all lived in the world since then. Everybody's familiar with it. But they're not probably familiar with exactly how bad it is. We have 25 people who are responsible for half of all super PAC spending. Just 25 people. So not so long ago, we call that a country described like that, a banana republic. But that's the United States of America.
So, Robert, you said what we can do about it. Give us some of the prescriptions in the book about how you can actually get to a more bipartisan and less corrupt future.
Well, it is bipartisan in that I think, again, as I said, like if you look at people's support for raising the minimum wage, taxing big corporations, cracking down on big tech, supporting an anti-monopoly policy, lowering drug prices, issue after issue, you're seeing 70, 80, and even 90% support. I think the number one thing to do is to deal with campaign finance to overturn Citizens United and have a system of public financing or small donor financing of our public elections. We've got to deal with regulatory capture so that regulatory agencies work for the public and not for the corporations they're regulating. We need an aggressive anti-monopoly policy to break up the big companies and stop them from leveraging their political influence. We need to support labor unions, so we've got an independent check on the power of big corporations by making it legal to organize and illegal, legitimately illegal, to interfere with union organizing, and on down the line. There's a set of things. There is for sure no silver bullet to the problem of too much corporate power.
My last question for you, Robert, is, because I've been thinking about this one recently, you name-checked all of these policies that have massive support. I could go through another list that has even like 90% level support. Banning stock trading by members of Congress as one example. And yet it never happens because of exactly the structural factors that you're talking about. And it makes me question if we even live in a democracy at this point when the will of the people seems to matter really not at all.
Well, the only answer is to organize and to overwhelm big money power with organized people power. In that one example, there is a problem with stock trading, but we made some progress on stock trading by members of Congress in 2007. We at Public Citizen did a lot of work on that. We were banging our heads against the wall for a while. We got some media coverage, and all of a sudden, people got outraged, and Congress had no choice but to enact some meaningful reforms, far too little as we see every day. But we made progress, and that's how we make progress every time. You take that example of the Medicare drug program, biggest ripoff, I think, in modern American history. But we just clawed back $100 billion of that in the Inflation Reduction Act. Again, we should have gone for it all. So we didn't get everything we needed, but we got something, and that's because people rose up and demanded it and overcame, to some extent, the power of big pharma.
All right. Well, a hopeful message. We appreciate you joining us, sir. Thank you.
Great to be with you. Thanks so much.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It's our pleasure.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.